It looks like it went live with no problems. Yay, winning. Oh my goodness. Today we are welcoming, for In the Trenches Live, we are welcoming April Buske to chat all about church communication. She gives me a thumbs up, y'all, because I said her name right. I'm very proud of myself too. As someone who has a name that is longer than 3 letters, I know what it's like to have a name that people mispronounce. So thank you for allowing me to get that right. April. I'm hoping some people will hop on with us today, but you know how it is. People are working. Maybe they're not on Facebook like some of us are all the time. But we do want to go ahead and I do want to go ahead and get started with our time together today. In the Trenches Live is all about just interviewing fellow church communicators, like all the people in this group, and having you just share a little bit about how you use technology in communications, and maybe just in general a little bit about like what's going on in your world. Oh, Victoria Counterman's in the house. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Hey, girl. Um, thanks for popping in. Okay, so April, I just want you to introduce yourself. Let us know where you are in the world, where you serve in ministry, and maybe a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So I'm April Buske. I serve at Christ Church in Davenport, Iowa. I like to say it's cities. And there are, I think, 7 cities that claim to be part of the Quad Cities. So it doesn't really add up, but that's my fun information for you today. So Christ Church is a United Methodist community in Davenport, Iowa. We're 67, 68 years old as a church. So not super old church, but not super young church, which is really fun. I have been on staff at Christ Church for 10 years. I hit 10 years in October, which is going to be really fun.
Wow.
The last staff member that hit 10 years, I did a special offering for, and it was like enough money to buy a used Harley. So I'm hoping maybe I get something fun for my 10 years. I don't know. I'll make sure to share this video with my boss after we record.
Yes, we must do.
I started 10 years ago as the youth person. We had kind of a small but growing youth group, and our church had just recently been through a pastoral change, and so kind of reviving itself, so like I suppose is a good way to say it. And over the course of 10 years, I think I've held that many titles because I just get intellectually bored. I need new things to kind of dig into and learn. And when sometimes we'd hire somebody new and they'd be like, I'm really interested in youth. And like, okay, we're going to shuffle this around.
Yes.
So we've done a lot of shuffling. But for the last 6 years, communication has always been a part of my role, which is really fun because prior to church work, I worked at a marketing solutions organization. So we did a lot of rewards and like rebate loyalty marketing. And so it was really fun to get to kind of bring some of that into the church world, like bringing that business experience and those best practices into the church world. And so now I am the online campus minister and director of communications because one person can do it all apparently with lots of caffeine.
We could have a whole conversation just about how the role, like if you say you're the church communications director, I say I'm the church communications director, Victoria says she's the church communications director, and then we listed our job duties, they would all be different. You know, because like it's not, every church is different. And while there might be some overlap, like some people, it's all about video. Other people, it's all about blog writing, you know, like that's their main, or graphic design. And yet you have to have your fingers in kind of all of that stuff. So that's one of the things I always think is so interesting about church communication directors is like, we're really a unique breed.
Yeah. And the range of, communication encompasses literally every single thing a church does, from writing a sermon to publishing a website. Like, so
right.
It does have a really broad scope, and nobody is going to be fantastic at every piece of it.
Exactly.
So I think for a lot of church communicators, it's like, we got to find what we're really good at and just focus in on that area and just become the best we can in communicating in that style.
That is such great insight. That's really, thank you for sharing that, because I think that is something, you know, there are things that you have to do that you're not great at, and you can delegate or, you know, hire out or whatever. Not always. You can't, that's another thing in the church space that you can't always hire out. It's like, we can't always just pay somebody to do it, right? Hence why the church communication director wears 47 hats, right?
Right.
But I do like that, like what you are good at, be really good at that. I do like that. And another thing that I think when we talk about church communications, a lot of time we're talking about like outward communications, but then there's also that whole section of like just making sure that everybody knows when the meetings are, when Sunday school starts, like internal kind of stuff too as a whole. Like that's a whole section of church communications as well. So we are going to dive into some fun stuff, but I am going to ask you a hard question. We're just going to knock the hard question out of the way first. And
Sounds good.
a new favorite question to ask, because I feel like just like we all have so many different areas of expertise or backgrounds that we're coming from, we also all have different things that we struggle with. But I feel like in sharing our communication struggles with each other, you know, that we can combine our expertise. So like if you're struggling with something that I'm good at, I can help you, vice versa. And so I really just want to hear, like, what do you think something that you tend to struggle with, or you think maybe you used to and you don't now, but like something that's an issue for you as a church communicator? What is something that you struggle with?
The low-hanging fruit answer would be control. Like,
Yeah.
I really like to control every like piece of communication. And
Right.
so control and probably trust are the two biggest things. Like, at what point do I trust people to be able to communicate without me having to be the middle person?
Ooh,
So
that's
that's
so good.
probably the low-hanging fruit end of it. So one of the things that I'm probably most proud of in my job is we've really looked at where communication has to go through me versus when it doesn't, and so really just figuring out where those boundaries are, and uh, that's been very helpful for me. So the control freak in me, is a little bit more tempered. Another thing that I really struggle with is assuming the person requesting communication has clarity about what they're trying to communicate.
Gotcha.
And what I've found in a lot of instances is when I'm talking with somebody that wants to promote an event, they don't necessarily know what they're trying to accomplish. And that's really challenging because I don't want to help them until they know what they want.
Right.
It's just kind of my default setting. I'm pretty cynical like that. So, if they don't know what they're going for, there's no way that I can be successful in communicating, because there's no way that I will meet their standard because they haven't said it. And
Right.
so, those are probably the two biggest areas that I struggle with in communicating.
I think that those two are so relatable because like you say, that whole concept, they're kind of, those two things are kind of related too, because it's like you want to trust that the ministry leaders have clarity, have consistency, have all of these things, have a plan. And really, they're struggling just like we all are with just trying to keep their head above water. So sometimes they're like, I don't know. I just know that we're having this event and I need people there. So do your magic. And so finding that process and being able to let go of what you don't have control over and never will have control over versus trying to kind of rein in the various levels of communication and ministries, and then what the goal is. I think I remember when I first started in church communications at my church, I had to kind of just figure out the lay of the, like, so I felt like I was always like walking on a moving platform. And then finally, when I was there long enough, I was like, oh, I know it's going to be moving, but I can see it coming. And so then I was able to help people communicate, because I knew, oh, this event that happens every year, it's still VBS, it's coming. We know it's coming. It's not a surprise. We can plan ahead. And then once I got those things down, like taking that and extrapolating out. But yeah, I think we can definitely all identify with that. Control and trust. Man, that's so good. So good. Victoria says, she says that also sometimes people think they know what they want or what they need or what they think is a good idea. And, you're like, no, we don't use the font that shall not be named to communicate. So I don't know. Does your church have, this total side note, I'm just throwing you a curveball here. But did your church, have they ever done, or do they currently still do what at my church we call the porcelain press? Have you ever had a porcelain
Oh,
press or a potty press?
we do not have a potty break in our bathroom stalls. Though sometimes I'm like, that would be a great idea to like captive audience, but then I'm like, it's just another thing for me to do. So
Yeah.
uh we do not have that.
We had one and it was like, I think we changed it like every week or something for a while, or every, like, it seemed like it was often I was doing this. And then of course I was it was the early days of social media when, so like it actually was like one of the places that you would want information.
Sure.
And then like then we figured out like we can put the things that are going to put on this very niche communications is like stuff that we don't have to change so often, so like quarterly information. But porcelain press, potty press, Victoria's asking what it is. So at my church, the porcelain press was in like a little plexiglass sleeve on the door of the toilet so that you could, yeah.
Literally captive audience.
Yes.
Yes.
So I just hope whenever people are watching this, if they had a porcelain press or a potty press, or maybe they named it something else, please tell me about it, because I just want to know I'm not alone.
So it's not a potty press story, but there's a little church in DeWitt, which is the town that I live in, and they send out a newsletter to all the other churches in their district. And our church in Davenport is one of them, and their newsletter is called DeWitness.
That is
And I
great.
giggle every single time. I like sometimes I groan because it's terrible, and other times I like giggle because it's brilliant. But
Yes.
most of the time, it's just like I can't believe they're still calling it this after 10 years.
Hey, I mean, if you've got something that works, listen, I'm still trying to come up with a reason to publish the Jeanette Gazette, because that's what I named my newspaper when I was in middle school that I had to do. And so I think that like I'm still trying to come up with a reason to have the Jeanette Gazette, because I think that's such a great name. So, speaking of communication wins and great names for products, let's move into the next part, which is the more fun part. Which, how can you get more fun than talking about potty press? I don't know. But I do want to hear, because it's all about you and your ministry wins. So I think of church communications as a ministry, and I want to hear some of the things that have gotten you the most excited during your 6 years as a church communications director.
So, I mentioned earlier that I really struggle with control. And so I stole an idea from a church communications group on Facebook. They called it the Shark Chart. Events are broken down into three categories: baby shark, daddy shark, or grandpa shark.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
like baby shark events, like it listed like how we would communicate each of the, like it was like a chart, so like
Mm-hmm.
X's on the ones that
Yeah.
we would check off. But like baby shark events had fewer checks, daddy shark events had more checks, and then grandpa shark had like all the checks, right?
Right.
I'm just realizing now how sexist it is. There is no mama shark on there, but
Yeah.
that this might need to change. We might need to
Yes.
have another category, or maybe daddy just is replaced by mama. I'm okay with that. But like daddy shark events were like ministry specific, so it was going out to just the teens or just the kids. um Sorry, baby shark was just the teens or just the kids. Daddy shark was like 30 to 45% of the congregation,
Okay.
and grandpa shark was like it applies to 50% or more of the congregation, or it's a strategic priority for our church.
Gotcha.
And so we really focused on ministries owned everything in the baby shark column.
Okay.
So they were responsible for communicating to their target audience, because when the teens have something special going on,
Right.
and it doesn't need to be managed by pulpit announcements or those kind of things,
Right.
unless it's like a strategic thing.
Right.
uh, and we really focused on the grandpa sharks as within my scope. So the daddy sharks, sometimes we would have me help, sometimes we wouldn't. It just really depended on their unique needs and their gifting as an individual ministry leaders. Like there are some ministry leaders that we have that I'm like, I'm not going to let you do this daddy shark event because more than 5 people are going to read it.
Yeah.
Because I still need that from them. But then there's others that like they took our brand guide, they know our tone, they know who we are as an organization, and they're going to run with it, and I don't have to micromanage that. So the daddy shark one is kind of in the middle, but then I and just really spend my time making sure that those large community outreach events or those strategic priorities are communicated really well for the outbound stuff. So
I
that's what
love
communication
that.
is doing for me.
Yeah, I love that. And we had a similar, and like I said, not from the beginning. Like, I was
Sure.
walking on the moving floor. But once we figured that out, we didn't have a fun name like the whole shark thing. That's really cool. We just called it tier 1, tier 2, tier 3,
Same
and
concept,
yeah,
less
the
fun.
same idea of, and then, basically we listed out every form of communication, including the potty press, including the email, including, posters on the breezeway or whatever, bulletin thing, different things like that.
Thank goodness COVID killed our bulletin. I am so grateful that we do not have a bulletin anymore.
Well, ours was like a quadruple fold. It was a whole
Nice.
thing. But we had all of these things, and then we would say, okay, if it's tier 1, it basically needs to go all the places. If it's tier 2, we need to strategically pick the places based on the demographic of the audience that we are trying to reach. And then the tier 3, tier 4 are the more, like you say, ministry specific, or literally sometimes it's 10 people. 10 people are going to be part of this event. We're going to make, handwritten notes and mail them to them or something. It was very strategic. In that way. And I do love that tier idea. And I also love you breezed by it just like it was it's a given. You said brand guide.
Sure. Yeah.
And I want to highlight that because for some churches, getting a brand guide would be a win. And I highly encourage, if you want to do something like this with a tiered system or a shark system, that you do have a brand guide so that no matter if they're running with it on their own, or it's something that you're doing as part of the Granddaddy Shark, that it's still going to be consistent, right? So even if somebody's has ownership of their own ministry channels, communications, that it still meets the overall tone. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our brand guide does a great job of like talking about our tone and like our target audience and what personas we want to communicate to.
Mm-hmm.
And that really has helped our individual ministry leaders understand um, like what words we're going to use, what's our common language, what things, when I first started, some ministries were like, we call our servants because they're serving, and we
Right.
call them volunteers because they're not doing anything important, it's just volunteering in the nursery.
Right.
And it's like, so we kind of picked common language and really used our brand guide to set that all up so that somebody can get that and understand pretty well who we are as an organization and communicate in a way that they'd be like, oh, that honors Christ Church. Like that really sounds like who they are as an organization.
Gotcha. That's so important. And it's so hard because, over your church is 68 years old. The churches I've worked with locally, one's 70, another 75 years old. They've been around a long time. The brand guide literally probably could have been 3.5 by 5 index card when the church started.
Sure.
And now it's way more complicated, and I get that, but it's really worth the time because I think everybody on the team understands there needs to be common language, but then the people that have been there 70 years may be using different language than the people that have been there 20 versus the people that have been there 5. And so pulling that all together is so important. Do you have any other wins you want to share or fun stories?
Sure. Okay. So one of the things that we decided so we went through this assessment called the Church Assessment Tool, or the CAT. The Methodist Church has conferences, so our conference put it on, and it really kind of looks at what your church values and how your church responds in crisis situations, and your level of trust with your staff and your leadership. And humble brag on Christ Church, we were the healthiest church in the conference, which I thought was pretty awesome. Like high value on scripture, high value on change and meeting people where they're at. So like both a high social justice and a high like scripture measurement, which is pretty unique in Methodist churches. Usually they really both value social justice or value
Right.
scripture and tradition. And then we have a high level of trust between our congregation and our leadership. And so we sat down with our congregation and did a lot of exploration about who we are as a church. And we asked them 3 questions. We said, if you were going to invite somebody to our church, where's the first place you would invite them? And then we said, and then what? And then what? So we kind of figured out what things in our organization were really important to the people within our organization. And then we did the same question with money. Outside of Christ Church, where do you give your time and money? And found overwhelmingly that our church was about reaching young parents, and we've named them Seth and Hannah. So we're about reaching Seth and Hannah, and Seth and Hannah have real world problems. You know, they might be working class. One of them might be struggling to find a job. They might not have college education. They might be in an apartment. They might be cohabitating, even if they're not married. They might be blended families. Like, so we recognize that they're real people. And then our church really got on board with that and decided that as an organization, just like if we were taking our grandkids out to a restaurant, we let them pick the restaurant, but we pay the bill, right? Like, so, you know, as mom and dad, I am certainly not picking McDonald's for my kids every meal, but I'm still going to pay for it when the kids want to go there. So my church had that same philosophy. Like, we're going to do whatever it takes to reach Seth and Hannah, and we're going to write the check for it. So it might mean that I have to give up something comfortable or something that I've done for a really long time in order to meet the needs of Seth and Hannah and their family. And so we've styled everything from our like external communications to our ministry meetings to all focus on how can we reach Seth and Hannah. And I think that's a really big win. I'm grateful that our church had enough trust in our staff and leadership to take that plunge, but it's been crazy. In our smaller service, which is like 50 people a week, we're seeing like 8 to 10 guests every single week, and they all fit that Seth and Hannah demographic, and it's just beautiful because we're reaching families. So but that's so much communication driven, even though it's like church's like decision. So I feel like finally, like, I'm seeing real fruit other than just like, this event was great, lots of people knew about it. Like, it's like, no, like, because of my work in communications, like, souls are being saved for eternity. And I think that's important.
Yes.
Like,
and you know what? That needs to be on a t-shirt. You know,
right.
So for those of you watching, you may not know this, but April and Victoria and I, and a lot of our Facebook group, Fam Bam, that's what we call us. We always are trying to find new t-shirts. And I think that idea, like the work I'm doing in church communications, is saving souls for eternity. I mean, if that's not a reason to get up in the morning and log on, that's what you have to do.
The only way I can force myself out of bed. Like, okay, time to make the donuts. Let's go save some souls through typing things on Facebook.
I hope people get the reference of Time to Make the Donuts, because I missed the time to make the donuts commercials. That was good stuff. Yes. Also, yum donuts. Well, thank you for sharing that, because that is just really inspiring to me. I'm like getting a little teary here. Like Victoria said, we needed this today. I think this is just something we could put on repeat, like all the time, just reminding us of like, this is not just about getting people to church on Sunday or to your fall festival or sign up for your VBS. This is about getting to dance with them in heaven, right? Mm-hmm. So thank you for sharing that. That win. That's a pretty big win.
Big win.
Also, I took copious notes while you were talking, because I was like, I need to remember this. Although I can just watch this later. I don't know.
Replay.
Okay, so the last 2 questions, and you can kind of answer these together. The first one is, what do you wish somebody told you in church when you first started in church communications? And then what encouragement would you give to somebody just in church communications in general, or maybe if someone who's like a little tech hesitant, whether it's with text in church or whether it's with even being on social, what encouragement would you give? And then what is something that you wish somebody would have told you?
So something I wish somebody would have told me at the beginning. I have two things. One is knowing like who to please. That sounds really like sad, but there are very few people in your church that you have to keep happy, and knowing who those people are is really important, because the lady that comes and pokes you like in the sternum and is like, I pay your salary with my
Right.
tithes and offerings, like, is not usually the person you have to keep happy.
Right.
It's fun. So just really knowing your church and who the people of influence are and getting their buy-in ahead of time before you make
Buy-in.
changes or shifts, like, is really important. And so know who those people are, like know who, if you communicate with them ahead of time, like one-on-one, take them out to coffee, they can be your biggest cheerleaders and your biggest advocate, or they can be your biggest enemy. And it's like, how do you get them on board first and get them to be your cheerleader instead of, your mortal enemy?
Yeah.
So that would be like the first thing. The second thing is really seek for clarity when you are communicating. So know two different wins. Know your ministry win and your participant win.
Okay.
And how I see those is very different. When we we do a back to school block party every year, and then a fall tailgate every year. So the back to school block party is like early August, like when everybody's going back to school. In Iowa, we go back right after the state fair, because the state fair is super important in Iowa. Everybody got to see that butter cow. And then usually like right around college football, we don't have any professional sports teams in Iowa, like no NFL, no MLB. So like college football is the thing here. So we always do a fall tailgate. And with those two events, the ministry win is very different than the participant win. So at the back to school blast, we have the inflatables and the face painters and all that kind of stuff. And the participant win is it's like a fun, free family event that they can come to kind of reconnect with their church family after summer camps and traveling have taken them away for a while. Our ministry win is that we get brand new updated information from every participant, and now we can communicate with them about every single thing coming up in the future.
Wow.
It's also gotten them back in the church doors, so we know that they're still active and a part of our community. So the wins are very different, and you need to be able to communicate those depending on the audience. So if I'm trying to get my church leadership board to cough up an extra $5,000 for an event, I need to be able to tell them how it's going to benefit the kingdom of God and the church long term. But the participant doesn't want to hear, I'm doing this to get your information.
Right.
Or I'm doing this so that I know whether or not you're still a part of our community. They need to hear that, like, it's a super fun way to get back in the groove. Like,
Yeah.
so knowing
right.
those two wins and being able to articulate them clearly is really important.
Yeah, that's so good. And I've never thought of it that way. When you were talking about ministry versus participant, I was thinking about like my brain was thinking the people that are coming and the people that are volunteering.
Oh, that's an
You know what I
interesting.
mean?
Sure,
But that's not what you even said. But that's where my brain was. But like, so another thing to think about too is like with the people that are serving that event, what's going to be like, what are they going to learn? How are they going to get closer to, like a ministry win for them too.
I just need you to scoop popcorn.
Yeah.
It's like, I need you to make these families feel so connected to our church that they want to come back on Sunday.
That's right.
Like, so casting that vision is really important.
Yeah.
But knowing those whys and then knowing who to please in the congregation were the two things that I wish somebody would have told me right away. It took me a long time to figure it out. It took me a long time to figure that part out.
I remember you were talking about like knowing who to please. And I remember before I even started working for the church, I volunteered a lot. My kids were really young. And of course I was all, trying to do all the things. And I got asked to be part of a summer activity for the kids. And I was going to be working, part of my team was the like facilities manager. And he was an older gentleman. His name was Joe. And I didn't know Joe, but he was like the guy that always walked around with the keys. Like I didn't know him. And somebody said, listen, big key ring, had a gajillion keys on it. And somebody said, listen, he acts like he's tough, but he's really just a softie. If you get on his good side, you're going to be on his good side forever. And so that just reminded me when you were talking about like who do you need to please? I remember thinking I'm going to show up with a big cup of coffee on that first day that we had to meet for this event, and I'm going to and sure enough, Joe became like one of my best friends and biggest advocates. And when I started working with the church, he was, a very big encourager for me, and helped me also to be introduced to the other people in the church that I needed to learn to communicate well with, and all of those things. So that's definitely definitely something that I appreciated being told even before I started working. And also I had a key to the church way before I even started working there because I knew Joe.
Because you knew Joe.
You're up here all the time, and I don't have time to keep on coming unlocking the church every time you want to be up here. So just take a key. So awesome. It was one of those things. Okay, so not everybody loves technology as much as we do, / spends as much time on Facebook and Instagram as we do. So what would you tell somebody that's trying to figure out, they know, like they've already gotten to the point where they know they need to do it. Like it will reach their demographic, all of those kind of things. But like, what would you tell them what kind of encouragement can you give them today?
There's all kinds of solutions out there that claim they can do it all. And, whether that's, text in church or, going to like a social media scheduler or something like that. I would say start really narrow and be really narrow and really consistent. So like text in church, there's a million things you can do with it. It literally can do it all when it comes to like keeping your congregation informed about what's going on. But I would say start with one thing and do that thing really well and really consistently. And when you get comfortable with that, add on the next thing. But I think it's more important to be narrow and focused and do that well and consistently than it is to try and do all the things. An example is when I first started in communications, we had Facebook, but then I was like, well, we need Instagram and we need a LinkedIn and we need a Twitter and I started all of these social media platforms and couldn't keep up.
Right.
And what I ended up doing was deactivating several of those accounts and really just sticking with Facebook and Instagram.
Right.
And once I felt like I got my sea legs and that I had consistency and had really good content, then I added on the next thing.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing when we started with text in church. I could have scheduled 1 million texts that first month. Like I was super excited about it and maybe went a little overboard anyway. But we started with just pastoral prayer messages.
Yeah.
So we just started texting people. We segmented our list and we text one group each week and said, how can we pray for you? And we always kind of found some like little tchotchke thing. Like on May the 4th, I was like, May the 4th be with you. I'm going to pray today. It was always so corny, but it worked. People loved it. And I think being really focused and doing that well before we added the next thing in helped me build trust with my people are responding, and then they wanted their voices included too. So then I went from just scheduling it as if it was me to scheduling it as if it was our pastor, and then scheduling time on his calendar to respond to the text.
Right.
And then it's like we started really narrow and got really good and consistent before we added something else.
Yeah, what I do those demos with new members every week where the lunch and learns where I'm teaching. And, most people come to Text in Church, for example, with a specific, like, I've heard it's really good for guest follow-up, or I've heard it's really good for member communication. So they come with that idea, and then they come to the first lunch and learn, and we're talking about the plan a visit feature on your website, and we're talking about outreach events like you were just sharing about a few minutes ago, how to RSVP and how to follow up after and all these things. And they're like, oh, I could do that too. I could do that too. And then one of the things I always say, because a lot of times like they're messaging in, like as I'm teaching, like, wait, I need to know more about this. And I'm like, you can do all of these. I'm showing you all that's available, but listen, you need to pick the one thing. Why did your church sign up? Do that first. Get the hang of it, and then you can add as many things as you want. There's no rush. You want to do it well, and you want to be able to be consistent. And I love what you said too about, having, you're maybe sending out those messages about prayer. Sometimes they come from you, sometimes they come from your pastor, but you are pulling your pastor in and he's involved in that prayer time. It's not like you're sending a message pretending to be someone you're not. Like he's,
Yeah.
he's involved in that. He's probably a user. He can see those messages, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the things that we always want to emphasize with text in church, especially, is like, this isn't designed to be some sort of like uh, automation for the sake of automation, but it's designed to help you connect, and using the tools like that to then make sure that your staff and ministry pastoral staff can connect with your members is really great. So I love how you did that, but I also love that slow roll. Like, we're just going to start small and then like expand. And now you always talk about how, like, what can you not do?
Right? I do so many things with text in church now, but if I tried them all at the beginning, like, or even with like our social media scheduler, like if I tried to use all of those features day one, like I just would have been so overwhelmed I quit. And like that just, it's intimidating when it can do all these things, but
yeah, I just now, for the social media scheduler that we use, yes, I do schedule some of these posts. I do post a lot of them live group, but they have this like where you can import like a CSV file. So like for the stuff we do for the Engage conference on Twitter, I'm like, oh, I can just, and then but it's been available since I started using the thing, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, or I'm going to sit here all day with Twitter open and do it live, or I can do this. And it made me be able to be more present with the attendees of the conference, right? So I totally get that.
It's totally the same thing with the automations and text in church too. Like, I have access to all of our ministry leaders' calendars. So like I can see when they have time available. And if I ask them to go schedule a text saying, hey, can you schedule this, for our, in a small group saying, hey, praying for you, a small group starts, any specific prayer requests. If I ask them to go schedule it, they're not going to. But if I schedule it and put it on their calendar, then they know I can log in and respond. So it's more about that, less about the automation and more about them being able to be present in the moment when people are responding.
Exactly. That's what I said, that they might respond and to be ready to pray. And it's true. It's true.
Yeah. And then I'm so like nerdy. I put in my calendar, like 4 days later, like follow up with so-and-so about this. Like every one of those prayer requests is like the week after I have a prayer text that goes out on behalf of me. It's just like my calendar is full, like follow up with this person, this person, this person, this person. But I've gotten to learn about so many things in our congregation, so many needs and like family things going on, that I can really be there and walk through things with people that I wouldn't have known about if we didn't have those like little texts go out. It seems so trivial, like it's a text message, but yeah.
Well, and it's, a lot of people, and, there's that constant back and forth between like social media and texting and all these other tools and stuff. Are they making us less connected with each other or more? It depends, But I think sometimes people are willing to share something via text or on social media or wherever that they may not want to say out loud in a small group.
Right.
It's just, it does provide that sense of safety sometimes for people. So I think especially with the texting, you can get like, sometimes you can get into a deeper conversation and a deeper connection when it starts that way through texting. So, well, April, I have taken up way too much of your time. I'm so sorry. We got sidetracked. It was the whole potty press thing. It's all my fault.
Sorry.
But I have loved this time that you have so graciously given us today. And I thank you so much for sharing your communication wins, your struggles, some of the big, getting us, reminding us we're all in this for eternity. We don't have to do this job for eternity. Praise the Lord. But the reason we do this is for the kingdom of God. And so I just thank you for circling it all back to that. And I really appreciate your time. And if you watched this later and you have any questions for April, I know that she's always in the Facebook group hanging out, and she'll be happy to answer them. And of course I will. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. Thanks. We will see you again soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
See you.